Now every day they explain as a different languages also. So now the video comes here in the English language.
The Viking Age is the name given to the period in Scandinavian history that
They
stretches from the
explain
end
all
of the 8th
information
century
very
to the end of the
clearly.
11th century. Viking means warrior of the sea. The Vikings came from all over Scandinavia, and even in their own times were known and feared for their attacks on foreign coasts. But Viking history is also about colonization, conversion to Christianity, establishing towns, and expanding territories. During the Viking Age, Denmark became united under one ruling king, and the Danes were converted to Christianity. This was a long and difficult process that took several centuries. The king set up trade centers that attracted craftsmen and merchants, and which gradually developed into towns, forerunners of the medieval merchant towns. The most noticeable aspect of the Viking Age is the energy epitomized by their voyages. Through them, they became part of European history. The basis for all this was their sailing ships. These were the means of staying in touch and in control of their territories, and the means of carrying cargo and people to trading places and towns, and of traveling out in the world by sea, river, and coastline.
यहाँ से देख रहे थे अपन.
By the year 1000, Roskilde had developed into one of the most important towns in Denmark. Here were churches and the seat of the monarchy, and the Roskilde Fjord was the gateway to the oceans of the world and to the sea voyages that kept the empire together and trade moving. But the water in the fjord didn't only lead out into the world. It also washed in towards Roskilde, bringing foreign ships with it. In the Viking Age, blockades were established outside the village of Scandinavian in order to control the traffic on the fjord. This was where the natural shipping route divided into 3 channels. The most direct channel was blocked by 5 old, well-used ships. It is these 5 ships that we see today in the Viking Ship Museum. The next channel was probably also blocked by ships, but they have not been preserved. The 3rd channel was very crooked and required local knowledge to navigate it, so this was left open, although traces of fencing around the channel indicate that it could be barricaded in the face of an attack. Written sources tell us that this barricade system worked in conjunction with a warning system on land. We think that it was men positioned on the old beacon hills that kept watch on the shipping in the fjord. If they spotted an enemy fleet, they lit a bonfire, a beacon, which could be seen from the next beacon hill, where a beacon was lit, which could be seen from the next beacon hill. Warning signals spread like the wind along the length of the fjord, telling people that trouble was on the way.
Oh, ये तो वाईफाई से ज़्यादा भारी था.
The open channel was barricaded, and the warriors who were to defend Roskilde prepared to face the enemy.
हाँ, ओल्ड मतलब बहुत ही ओल्ड है ना.
Roskilde lost its importance during the Middle Ages in favor of the new harbour port of Copenhagen. The blockades were not looked after, and in time were covered by sand and mud. It was forgotten that this was a blockade from the Viking Age. But every now and again, bits of the ships from these blockades were washed up. Very old bits of ships. And at the end of the 1950s, archaeologists from the National Museum donned their frogman suits to search for what local rumour called a medieval ship. The fjord soon showed that it held a treasure that went beyond our wildest dreams. 5 ships from the Viking Age, the most important ever maritime find in Denmark. It was decided to salvage the 5 ships from the bottom of the fjord, something that had to be done with the greatest of care. In 1962, a fence of iron sheeting was erected around the find. The water was pumped out, and a man-made island took shape in the middle of the fjord, where the archaeologists could excavate and salvage the ships. After 900 years underwater, the wood of the ships was much decomposed. All digging was done by hand, and the individual parts of the ships were rinsed down with water pistols. The entire excavation was constantly sprinkled with water to protect the old wood from drying out. During the salvage operation, the ship's parts were documented exactly as they were found at the bottom of the fjord. Before it was removed, every individual piece of wood was given a number so that its rightful place in the ship could be found again. Piece by piece, it was brought out of the water and drawn to full scale. And now began the enormous work of conserving the ships so that they could survive out of the water. A synthetic wax called polyethanol glycol was used in order to do this. One of the properties of glycol is that it disperses in warm water, but crystallizes and sets again when taken out of the water. The many thousands of ship parts were conserved in large tanks of water. Glycol was added little by little and was slowly absorbed by the decomposed wood, replacing the water that normally holds the cell structure of wood in place. For some of the wood, it took several years before the water was replaced by glycol. Eventually, it was possible to transfer the conserved ship parts to the newly built Viking Ship Museum in Roskilde, built specifically for these 5 ships. The work of restoring these ships to life could now begin. It was the world's largest jigsaw puzzle, and it needed much patience and care. It took more than 25 years to reassemble the ships. The 5 ships give a very representative picture of the fully developed sailing ships of the late Viking Age. Ships which were built for particular purposes and waters, and to display the power, might, and wealth of the Vikings. 2 of the ships were built for trade. They were wide and deep, and originally had half decks fore and aft, and an open storage room midships. They were primarily sailing ships. The oars were only used to assist in maneuvering. One of the trading ships was built in Denmark. It is a good example of the many small ships, crewed by 5 or 6 men, that plied trade in things like beer, salt, glass, and clothing between towns and marketplaces in Denmark. The other trading ship was built in Norway. With its crew of 5 to 8 men, this ship could sail everywhere in the North Sea, the Baltic, and the North Atlantic Ocean. It was ships like this that supplied the inhabitants of the islands in the North Atlantic with articles such as building timber, grinding mills, iron, and clothes in European fashion. These ships would also have been used to transport bishops from Greenland to church synods in Norway. 2 of the ships were built for military purposes. They are long and narrow, built for speed and for carrying many men. There was a deck running the entire length of the ship, and they were powered by a combination of sails and oars. The small warship was built in Denmark. It had space for a crew of 30. It could sail everywhere in Danish waters and in the Baltic. This could have been one of the types of ships that enabled the king to hold his kingdom together. The large warship belongs to the famous longships of the Viking Age. It had a crew of 80 and was built in Dublin, the most important Viking base in Ireland. And it is quite possible that this ship took part in the battle for the English throne and in the dramatic events that ended the Viking Age. The Viking Ship Museum has reconstructed in full size all 5 of these ships. Many years of study lie behind these reconstructions. Study of the ship's constructions, of materials and tools, and wear and tear that would indicate how the ships were used. The reconstructions follow the same building principles as the ones used on the original ships, and the tools used are copies of Viking Age tools.
अच्छा उन्होंने ऐसे बनाई भी है वाइकिंग एज में कैसे बनाते थे लोग
The planks are split from long, straight tree trunks, while the sterns and all inner pieces are hewn from pieces of wood that have grown in the right shape. The natural fibers of the wood are followed at all times.
हम खेत में रहते थे ना तो माँ सुबह को उठाती थी 6 बजे में डाले थे मुझे लकड़ी फोड़ने
This
पड़ती
means
थी
that all
जलाने
the
के
parts can be hewn into light, 10-inch dimensions, but still have immense strength. The ships of the Vikings were very light and very supple. The long planks are held together with iron nails, while the inner parts are fastened to the sides of the ship with nails made of willow. The ships are smeared with wood tar, and especially the warships are painted in bright colors. The square sail is made of linen or wool, and was often daubed with a mixture of fat, ochre and tar to stop the wind blowing straight through it. Raffia from lime trees, horsehair and animal skins are some of the materials we know the Vikings used to make ropes for the ship's rigging. To build and equip a ship took top quality materials, highly skilled craftsmen, good organization, and a strong support system. Test runs have proved the seaworthiness and maneuverability of the Viking ships. They could beat up against the wind at 60 degrees. The merchant ships could hold an average speed of about 4 knots. They can be favorably compared in speed and maneuverability to the small cargo ships that were in use just after the First World War, the end of the sailing era. The warships could travel at great speed because of their long, narrow hulls, and they had the advantage of using their oars in headwinds or when becalmed. Top speed for a warship was 15 knots, but an average traveling speed would have been around 6 knots. In these ships, a voyage from Denmark to England would take 3 days in favorable weather conditions. A voyage to Greenland would take 3 weeks if the weather was right, while sailing to the Mediterranean would take 14 days, if one resisted the temptation to stop on the way. Working with these 5 ships from Roskilde Fjord has given us new insights to the Vikings, their ships and their voyages, and also to their contribution to the European culture of the time.
नहीं 16 नहीं है, 1,500 का टिकट है।